Welcome back to an all-new episode of SJ Insider, a special edition of SJHL Insider on a Wednesday, not a Thursday, and that is because yesterday was the SJHL and SJHL Trade Deadline. Myself and Clark Munroe will get right into it to recap quieter day than I think most of us expected, but a quiet day in the SJHL Trade Deadline. But before we do, we have to give a big shout out to all of our sponsors at the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League: Chevrolet, Capital Auto Mall, Cantera Seeds, RBC, SaskTel, SGU, Direct West, Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, Tourism Saskatchewan, Young's Equipment, and Sask Lotteries. Thank you so much for your support, because, of course, without your support, this show and SJHL Weekly and all the fun things we do at the SJHL would not be possible. So let's bring in Clark Munroe. Clark, how are we doing today?
Doing great. It's been
it's been
an intriguing last few days.
Like
Sorry. It's been an intriguing last couple of days here, just to kind of see which teams we're going to make moves.
It sound better, though?
It feels better.
Exactly.
Right? It feels better. So it's been a fun couple days, and let's get into it. I mean, there, like you said, it was a little bit quieter, but storylines still are abound.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Let's start with January. There was a handful, just over a handful of trades on January 10th itself, the final day of the trade deadline, of course. But there were a couple on January 9th, the day before, that I think we should definitely touch on. There was a trio of trades. Weyburn traded the rights to Sam Bolt to the Dauphin Kings for a PDF. Nothing crazy. The Kindersley Clippers and Melfort Mustangs made a swap, and it's funny because when you look at the three trades on January 9th, the two biggest ones are within the SJHL.
Yes, you'll have to see it.
Yeah. Kindersley traded Wyatt Cook to the Melfort Mustangs in exchange for Alex Mack, so the Kindersley Clippers getting a little bit younger. Of course, we kind of know where Kindersley's at right now in the SJHL standings. I mean, obviously they're not mathematically out of a playoff spot, but out of any team that's out of it, they're 9 points back right now, and if they want to get into a playoff race, they're going to have to go on a bit of a run.
Yeah, and I mean, Melfort, how much have we talked about how hot Melfort's been lately, and to just get a little bit older, a little bit more experience in their lineup does not hurt them at all, and Wyatt Cook is he's a solid contributor in the SJHL, so a nice little pickup for Melfort, I think.
So and then the last one on January 9th was I think it was a surprise. I think it caught a lot of people off guard for sure.
Yeah.
It was a big surprise. The Melville Millionaires traded 20-year-old forward and captain Zach Kane to the Flin Flon Bombers in exchange for 20-year-old forward Jackson Martins, a 2023 conditional draft pick, and future considerations. Now, that trade kind of came down the pipe late on Monday. What were your initial thoughts on that trade?
Well, my initial thoughts were that I saw Melville tweeted it out. That was the first time I saw it, was that Melville tweeted it, and it said the name Jackson Martins. And I'm like, wow, Melville went and got Jackson Martins. And then underneath that, as you keep reading, for Zach Kane. And then, initially it's like, okay, there's a lot of questions here come up. 20 for 20-year-old swap. Very good, top 20 scores coming either way. I think Zach Kane's around 10, and I think Jackson Martins is, 17, 18, somewhere in there. So two very good players in this league getting swapped for each other. A couple different styles of players as well. So like there's that aspect to it. What's Flin Flon getting? What's Melville getting? And then the extras as well, just kind of tack on for Melville. I think it fits into Melville's maybe next steps for their organization. So I really like this trade for both sides.
It is a good trade for both sides. I would agree with that. I mean, for Flin Flon, you're getting a player who obviously has a ton of leadership. I mean, we talked about it with every time we had Mike Rooney on, whether it be SJHL Weekly, SJ Insider, even if you talk to him just around the rink. He always spoke very highly of Zach Kane, his leadership, what he brought, day in, day out on the ice for the Melville Millionaires. And the Flin Flon Bombers are going to get another player with a lot of leadership, and another player similar to that trade that they made way back in October, if you remember that, when they acquired Alex von Sprecken from the Estevan Bruins, but another player that really loves to throw the body around. And it makes them a very interesting team come playoff time, because we all know how the intensity ramps up, and so does the physicality, and they are going to be a very, difficult team to play against in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think actually when we were talking about it, just you and I, Jeromy, I think it was kind of those thing where who are they going to end up having to beat in the playoffs? There's going to be some teams that are really hard to play against, and I think this adds a little bit of a dynamic. Just continues to build that Flin-Flon mentality, and I think Zach Kane's going to fit like a glove up there. And honestly, looking again the other way, Jackson Martin's going to fit like a glove. I think in Melville, he'll get a really good opportunity there.
Yeah, I think that's, and then let's look at it from that side of things. Obviously, Melville right now, going into Wednesday night's action, they're only 2 points out of a playoff spot,
right?
Or 3 points out of a playoff spot, I do believe.
Yeah.
Regardless, they're in striking distance of a playoff spot. So to get back a player like Jackson Martins to come in, and he is going to, you have to remember, you mentioned it, Clark, he's a top 20 scorer in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. But think about Jackson Martins playing for the Flin-Flon Bombers at the start of this season and the amount of weapons that obviously Mike Reagan and company have up in that lineup for the Flin-Flon Bombers. And now with Martins getting traded to the Melville Millionaires, you have to think Jackson Martins is now going to be a top-line guy for Melville as they make a stretch or a run down the stretch. And he's going to have to be, one of the go-to guys for Melville when maybe he wasn't per se the go-to guy in Flin-Flon.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, maybe he wasn't that go-to, but he still had 29 points in 33 games, 11 goals, and barely any of those were on the power play. And I think he's going to get a big opportunity there as well in Melville. So you can only see those numbers going up as he gets more and more ice time, more opportunities, and maybe becomes one of the leaders in that group as well.
So that was the big deal. I would say that was, and I think I'm not out of it by saying I think that's the biggest trade of the trade. That was the biggest trade of the trade, the last 48 hours prior to the trade deadline. There were some interesting moves on the trade deadline day on January 10th. Here's what we'll do. I'll read them all out, and then we can kind of break them down a little bit. Okay, so the Weyburn Red Wings traded the rights to Boston Gelowitz, goaltender Boston Gelowitz, to the Battleford North Stars for a 5th-round pick in the 2023 SJHL Draft. The Larange Ice Wolves traded the rights to Carter Briltz to the Weyburn Red Wings for a PDF. The Melville Millionaires traded 19-year-old forward Noah Wills to the Sherwood Park Crusaders of the Alberta Junior Hockey League for a PDF and future considerations. The Nipawin Hawks traded Jovan Melee to the Rockland Nationals for a PDF. Kindersley Clippers traded Jacob DeWitt to the Olds Grizzlies for a PDF. And the Weyburn Red Wings trade Ethan Willens to the Niverville Nighthawks for a PDF and future considerations. When I look at that list of trades, Clark, and I think you're probably going to agree with me, the one trade, the biggest trade that stands out also involves Melville moving, one of, or if their leading goal scorer, point scorer, Noah Wills, to the Sherwood Park Crusaders for a PDF and future considerations, especially for a team looking to make a push for a playoff spot. A bit of a surprise that Melville moved on from one of their leading goal scorers. Yeah,
19-year-old kid too. That weighs into it as well, right?
Sure.
And very skilled player, and I think he's gonna go to Alberta and have a really great opportunity with Sherwood Park, I think. And again, for Melville, I think it's just Mike Rooney needing to shuffle the deck a little bit. Again, he gets some future considerations in that, so that'll help teams down the road as well with him. And it was an interesting move. It maybe caught me a little bit off guard, but we'll see what those future considerations are, right? Because we will never know what this trade is actually going to be until those are settled. So I'm going to hold my tongue a little bit on that until we see what ends up happening there.
Well, and off the top of my head, Noah Wills was, I think, just above a point per game player right now. Prior to this trade, was just above a point per game player in the Saskatchewan.
39 and 34, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Just above a point per game player in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League so far this season. However, with that being said, I think a lot of people had higher expectations and thought he was going to be easily a top 5 point getter in the SJHL this year. I think at the beginning of the year, I think I said on the very first episode of SJHL Weekly with Noogsy, I said he was going to lead the league in points.
And early on, they had got off to a really good start. Him and Zach Kane were right at the top for a while at the beginning of the season.
I think this is, sometimes in sports, not just hockey. A fresh start can obviously help a player that may have hit a rut. And I'm not saying Noah Will's hit a rut or anything like that. You get above a point per game player, but I'm sure he probably wanted higher point totals so far this season. And obviously we wish him the best in Sherwood Park, but he still has had a good season so far.
Yeah, his kid's got a ton of skill. I think he's going to fit in really well. In any lineup,
one of the fastest guys in the SJHL
for sure, and he had a couple highlights of the weeks over the course of the season. So I think he's gonna land on his feet, and I think he'll be okay. And good luck in Sherwood Park, and I think Sherwood Park's gonna love him.
The other trade that really intrigues me the most, you look at the January 10th transactions, and you see 3 trades involving the Weyburn Red Wings.
Yeah.
But the one that does intrigue me the most is them acquiring the rights to Carter Briltz from the L'Orange Ice Wolves. And today, if I'm not mistaken, the Victoria Royals had announced that he had left the Victoria Royals, where he has spent the last year and a half in the Western Hockey League. And it appears he is on his way to Weyburn to join the Red Wings. So, the Wings are going to get... We talked about the addition of Riley Morgan for Weyburn and how much he's brought to that hockey team. But now you're adding a guy who's 18 years old, has a year and a half of Western Hockey League experience to your lineup. And you know what? Cody Mapes has quietly built a forward group up front that has a lot of depth.
Yeah, and Carter Briltz, 6 foot, 185. He's built well. He's from Regina, so maybe the home cooking closer to home might be good for him after being in Victoria. Obviously, it's a big move for a young kid, and he had put up great numbers in AA here in Regina when he was in the under 15 league here, and then solid AAA career as well, and then kind of went up and down with Victoria. So he's kind of been up and down a little bit from the dub over his years. Now he has played the last 88 games of his career in Victoria over the last couple seasons. So they've given him an opportunity there, and he's coming back to the SJ, and I think he's going to get a great opportunity with Cody Mapes and the Weyburn Red Wings. I think they're going to, I would imagine that they would give him a lot of ice time. He's going to play with some really solid players, and we'll see how he ends up fitting in there.
Well, and that's the thing, is we talked about it after the Weyburn Red Wings added Riley Morgan from the L'Orange Ice Wolves just prior to the December 1st roster cut down deadline, whatever you want to call it. There's no official name for that December 1st. We really got to get an actual name for that deadline.
We'll put up a poll question.
Yeah, sure. The poll will answer it.
Yeah.
But they have, the addition of Riley Morgan, you see it now in the way that the Wings play, is they have depth up and down their lineup. So adding a guy like Briltz to them, it's just going to bolster their offensive attack, moving forward, especially down the stretch when they are fighting for a playoff spot going into tonight's action. Now they're 1 point back of Notre Dame for the 8th and final playoff spot, but they have a lot of games down the stretch against teams that are right around them in the standings, and a move like this is going to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've only seen the effects that Riley Morgan has had on Ty Mason. We've seen it on their power play numbers. We've seen it on their record since he's gotten there. They've been doing quite well. So if you add another younger piece to that, maybe with some dynamic skill, I think that's going to be a really good fit. And, we see their lineup with Willens getting moved out.
Sure.
There's a spot right there for Briltz, and I think it's in the top 6. I think Willens, if I'm not mistaken, might have been playing with Turin and Kalen on the second line, I want to say, or at least on their on their depth chart that they post on Twitter. So I think it opens up a top 6 spot for him. At the very worst, he's going to play on a really solid third line role type of spot for him, and it opens up a big opportunity for him. Like I said earlier, I think it's just going to be a great fit, and he seems like the kind of kid that Weyburn's going to fall in love with pretty quick.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Based off some background, last year I was the PA announcer for the Prince George Cougars of the WHL. Yes. I saw Victoria a lot.
Yeah.
And I saw Briltz a lot with the Victoria Royals, and he was a really good young player for them last year. And I thought, you know what, if he continues to grow and go on the trajectory that he was on, he's going to be a very good junior hockey player. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like things have kind of worked out in Victoria, but he's going to be a great addition for the Weyburn Red Wings, because I really liked him last year when he was playing in the Western Hockey League. There were also So we're those trades I just listed off. I just want to point out those are listed at sjhl.ca. If you would like to see all the trades from the last 48 hours or all season, really.
Yeah, there was a couple of days ago as well too that
right.
Trickled in. So.
If you want to see all those, you can head to sjhl.ca and check out all the transactions. But there were some transactions that are not on that page. Partially because I know the one I'm about to read off, it's not a trade, it's a signing, and it's actually, for me, I think it's a big one, and I think it could definitely help. And that's the Nipawin Hawks announced that they had signed 2002 born defenseman Bond, James Bond.
Yeah,
and it's pronounced exactly like that.
Yeah.
And his name is James. I'm not making that up.
Silent D. No, there's no D on it. No D.
James Bond. 2002 born defenseman, 125 BCHL games experience. And I can tell you firsthand, again, from my time working in BC, he played for the Prince George Spruce Kings. He's a very talented defenseman, 6 feet tall. And you know what? He's going to provide some good veteran leadership, I think, to the Nipawin Hawks when it comes to the blue line, because we've talked it time and time again this year. Xander Stewart has been an anchor for that team.
Yeah.
He plays power play, penalty kill, obviously 5-on-5, playing, 25, 26 minutes a night, that ballpark, anywhere from that. But James Bond coming in is going to, I think, take a little bit of relief off of Xander Stewart and provide that veteran leadership back there and hopefully contribute and help. Obviously, Nipawin, we've talked about them struggling this year, too, of keeping pucks out of the back of their net. I think they've allowed the second most goals in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. So a move like this, I think, is not only going to help the leadership on the back end, especially for a young hockey team, but also it should help them a lot in their defensive zone.
Yeah, 130 goals against. And that was going to be my point, is that anytime you can add a steady 20-year-old defenseman with that many games of experience in Junior A to come in and maybe help steady the ship a little bit. We talked about Nipawin a little while back when they got Jackson Fellner and how the impact that he maybe had, just stabilizing it a little bit, helping out a bit back there, maybe kind of just like calm the waters a little bit maybe from what they were experiencing early on in the year. And since then, it's been kind of steadily improving. Now you add a solid 20-year-old defenseman with a lot of experience into that lineup, and he's just he seems like one of those instant fit type of guys. Like, I think he'll just slide right in, he'll fit in really tightly in that, probably the top 4 pairs, I would assume. Top four defensemen. Defensemen, I should say, not pairs.
There's not 4 pairings of defensemen.
Tad Cozen's going with a really interesting strategy in the second half.
Yeah.
4 pairs, no. So I think he'll fit right in the top 4, and a really great move by Nipawin and the staff there. I like that a lot.
I do too. I think for me, I've kind of mentioned what I thought of it, but it also, I think, speaks a lot to Tad Cozen and the organization, showing, hey guys, you know what? We've had a really solid season so far. So to bring in a guy to help down the stretch, a 20-year-old, and for that playoff push, and to help them, hopefully get into the playoffs. I think that's like a vote of confidence from your coaching staff and your organization to the players.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? Let's just be really honest with where they're at in the standings.
Well, I'm always honest.
Yeah, yes, you are. 32 points. 8th place below them is 28 points, 27, 26. They're not necessarily locked into that 7th place either.
Nope, not at all.
So
nope.
I really give kudos to Tad Cozen for not sitting back and just saying that this is good enough and adding a little bit more stability to the roster. I think that's a really good move, like I said earlier, and this will really help, I think, solidify them at least in that 7th spot, and then we'll see what happens the rest of the way.
And the other transaction that was not on the SJHL website, which I'm sure will be up probably shortly after we finish recording, was the transaction by the Flin Flon Bombers acquiring... I might screw up the pronunciation on his name. Baron Stib? Sure. From the Aberdeen Wings of the NAHL for future considerations, it looks, or a player development via PDF. Pardon me. But a 19-year-old forward, another 19-year-old forward coming into the Flin Flon Bombers locker room. He had 2 goals and 3 assists with the Aberdeen Wings in the NAHL so far this season. But I think for me, when it comes to what Mike Reagan has done at the trade deadline, I think you're building your depth for hopefully for Flin Flon, another lengthy playoff run. And I think that's what they've done with obviously bringing in Zach Kane and now another 19-year-old forward.
Yeah, and actually, if you go to, I think it was Flin Flon's announcement of it, Mike Reagan was quoted as saying they weren't overly sure about it, and then when they saw his film, they fell in love with him almost instantly because of his work ethic, his motor, that kind of stuff, his physicality. Even as a smaller-bodied guy, apparently he has a really good motor. And again, what did we say earlier about the style Flin Flon likes to play, how they're building their team throughout the season? It's those hard-working guys who are going to forecheck you and make it really hard for you to play on any given night. And I think from the sounds of it, this fits right into that mold. I think this is a really good pickup by Reagan, Mike Reagan, I should say, and we'll see how he fits into the lineup on a nightly basis. But overall, we've already seen his family follow us on Twitter, so shout out to the family. They're buying in, and I think that Flin Flon, again, I said this about Carter Briltz and Weyburn, seems like the kind of kid that Flin Flon's really going to like. For
sure. So that's kind of the recap of all of the, I don't think we missed any, transactions, signings.
There was the one goalie that Melville brought in, and that was an addition as well.
Correct.
If we want to maybe bring that one up really quick, they added a goalie because obviously there's a little bit of uncertainty with Kelton Pine's status.
Yeah, it's because Kelton Pine right now is with the Regina Pats. And as a result, they don't know when he's gonna come back. Clement Labois played both games against the Yorkton Terriers. It appears he's going to be the guy down the stretch. I see that you have the goalie up, but
Ethan Rao.
He played in the KIJHL for the first half of this season, and I think in the quote, correct me if I'm wrong, the quote said from Mike Rooney, head coach and GM of the Melville Millionaires, it's a player that their scouting staff had kind of targeted for potentially bringing into the organization next year, but due to their situation, they're bringing them in now.
Yeah, expedited the plan, it says. Yeah, exactly. So, obviously, if you're going to pick up a goalie from the junior B level in BC, he's probably putting up really good numbers. I would assume he's had a really solid season there. He's a 2004, so he's 18, so he fits in again to that look to the future that Melville has at the moment. And over the next couple of years, I think if, I'm not going to make any promises here, but if he comes in and performs well, they got a nice little tandem there with Clement Labois and now Ethan Rao for the next couple of years. And depending on how Kelton Pine kind of factors into that equation as well, with his status with the WHL's Regina Pats, we'll see how that all goes. But overall, doesn't hurt to add a goalie at this time of the year.
Speaking of which, we did forget another one.
Oh, good.
We did forget another one.
No, we didn't, because we got to it.
No. It's funny because as soon as you said, there was a goalie signed, I thought of one, and then you said a completely different one.
Oh, good.
So we missed 2 goalie signings, which is bad because I'm a goalie guy.
Come on.
We forgot about the Humboldt Broncos. The Humboldt Broncos.
Right.
Also, they signed 2003 born free agent goaltender Jared Picklick.
Yep.
From the who last played for the Lethbridge Hurricanes of the WHL. I mean, we've talked about on SJHL Weekly with Rory McGoran. I mean, he's talked about, I think Humboldt just wants to find some consistency in between the pipes. They've tried out a number of different goaltenders, and they're hoping that a guy like Jared Picklick can come in and kind of stabilize that. Even though we've seen the last month and change, Benjamin Motu has played pretty solid for them.
Yep.
But it is asking a lot for an 18-year-old goalie to come in and
definitely.
essentially be the guy. So I think for Humboldt, they're hoping that Jared Picklick, a guy with Western Hockey League experience, can come in and kind of help stabilize the job and form, I would assume, a pretty good tandem with himself and Benjamin Motu.
Yeah, 6'2", 185, nice size for a goalie, as anybody would know, and 19-year-old player. 25 games last year for Lethbridge, so he got some considerable time. It's not like he was like a middling third goaltender or by any stretch. He played 25 games, and I think he got moved, to Tri-City at some point this season, and so now he's ending up in Humboldt, and I think it's a good fit because that's what you guys have talked about on SJHL Weekly. Shout out to Monday's editions of SJHL Weekly every week.
Good plug.
You're welcome. But that's one thing that Rory has mentioned a few times, and I don't think Rory's ever said that it's like a travesty or it's like
not at all. No.
But stability in the goaltending department is very important, and especially at this time of the year when you're really pushing for that playoff spot, you're trying to figure out where you're going to end up, and if you have a little bit of a question mark at net, it always adds a little bit of concern. So now that Motu's stepped up, we've seen him. What did he win? Goalie of the week or goalie of the month, I guess, for December. So he
SJHL goalie of the month.
Thank you, SJHL goalie of the month.
Shout out to SJHL.
Appreciate that, Jeromy.
Your authorized dealer.
So to see him step up, at least in December, and now to add to the department, to the group as a whole, I think we all see what Humboldt thought was a priority, and Scott Barney has addressed it. So we'll see how it goes now going into the second half.
For sure, and we'll see if he gets maybe he'll get his first start with the Humboldt Broncos tomorrow night when the Humboldt Broncos play host to the Flin Flon Bombers. Now I think we've hit on everything.
Did we get him?
I think so. So my question, I guess, to you now, Clark, I'll answer it too. When you look at all the moves at the trade deadline, who might be your winners? Like who are you looking at as teams that you think did a really good job helping improve their team for the stretch to run?
Flin Flon. I think of who's at the top of the standings right now. Flin Flon's number 2. And what did Mike Reagan do but bolstered their identity? Mm-hmm. And I think that's important too, because sometimes you add players for the sake of adding, which is fine. It's some teams that's fine. But if you add to your identity or build on an identity, I think it just makes your team that much stronger as a whole. And I think what Mike Reagan added in Zach Kane, I think is going to be a great fit. Leadership, scoring, that physicality, that grittiness that he has. Bringing to that lineup, and then just that depth add. I just love that depth add, and I shout out to the family again because they instantly followed us on Twitter, and I really appreciate that from them.
How do you win over the SJHL media team?
You follow us on Twitter.
Just follow us.
That's all it takes.
Follow us on Twitter.
The Leachy family,
like us on Facebook.
The Leachy
follow
family.
us on Instagram.
Yeah.
Subscribe to the YouTube channel.
It's not that hard. The Leachy family from Notre Dame, shout out to them. All of them follow us.
Yes.
But anyways, I just like what Flin Flon added, and throughout the season, how they've tinkered, and Mike Reagan's added. We talked about Alex von Sprecken and others throughout the year. I just think that was a really solid addition for them.
I would agree with you on the Flin Flon Bombers. I would also say I personally like the addition of Carter Briltz and Weyburn.
Yes.
I really do. I think that's going to be a really good depth piece for them down the stretch. And the best part is, he's 18.
Yep.
So it's a player
future move also.
It's a player that has some time, and you can build around. But that's a really good addition, especially for the stretch run, going down the stretch, trying to make the playoffs. But yeah, I would agree with you. I think Flin Flon, they definitely made the biggest splash at the trade deadline. I guess my follow-up question to that, was there a team maybe at the trade deadline you were surprised? And some background, we do not know the carding situation for each team in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. So this is just obviously speculation or anything like that. But was there a team that you were surprised maybe didn't make a move to try and improve their team, or just a team that you thought, may have done something else?
I'll throw 2 out there. And again, reiterating, we don't know the carding situation.
No idea.
So
zero idea.
And the card, if you don't know, teams have set amount of cards, essentially player additions that they're allowed to have or signings.
And you have to be down to 23 cards by essentially the trade deadline.
So there is a chance that some teams used up all of these available slots
all their
already,
cards.
and they weren't able to. So the one that stood out the most because of who they recently lost, and through no fault of the team, he just decided to go to university, which is great for him, Alex Blanchard. That's Estevan. And now, if you click on their roster right now, they have 5 listed defensemen, especially after losing Blanchard. So I think they have 16 forwards listed. So that was one team that, again, if they did have the ability to do so, I was surprised that maybe they didn't make a swap of some kind in that regard.
Sure.
And then the other one I would say would be, I guess they did move Carter Briltz, but Larange, maybe not bolstering their lineup in some form throughout, whether it was a forward or a defenseman. They are very well solidly built. I love how they built their team this year.
Too.
But I was surprised, and again, maybe they weren't able to, but I was surprised they didn't maybe add something. But that's all.
Yeah, I think I would guess, again, speculating, because we don't know the card situation. Because of all the movement Larange had done prior to the January 10th deadline, I'm going to guess they didn't have any cards. They did, obviously, they traded the rights to Carter Briltz to the Weyburn Red Wings. But, yeah, I would guess a team like Larange, to be example, probably didn't have any more cards left, because I'm sure if not, they would have looked at bolstering their team, because they're right in the mix. They're right in the they're in that battle from 2 to 5, looking to try, or 2 to 6 rather, of the 5 teams trying to battle for home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs. And I would agree with you on Estevan too, and that's, again, good chance that's a card situation. Down in Estevan, where we've seen a lot of player movement down there, could be a card situation. The only other one that I was interested in too was the Melfort Mustangs. I thought they would have taken you never know with Trevor Blevins. He's always active at the trade deadline. We've talked about it on a couple of shows, but they did make a move as they acquired Wyatt Cook from the from the Kindersley Clippers. But
add that veteran guy, one of the
100%. But at the same time too, I've been thinking about this when I was doing my prep for the show. Is the tricky thing is with Melfort is for a lot of this season they haven't had their full team.
That's what I was going to say. That's exactly where I was.
They haven't been healthy, and I think when that team is healthy, they are. I don't know if you really need to add too much to it, and maybe that's exactly why Trevor Blevins and company didn't. Yeah,
and I mean, Ben Tkachuk came back from an injury. He's been performing unbelievably
Zach
well.
Summers was away at World Junior.
He was gone. They added Ryan Duguay earlier in the year.
Yep.
So I mean, that was a really important addition. He's got over a point per game since he's gotten there.
Yeah.
They have a great goaltending duo.
Yeah.
Their blue line is the highest scoring blue line in the league.
Yeah.
We learned that over a text message group chat the other day.
Well, I kind of already expected, without knowing the numbers, I kind of already
They're
knew that.
A very solid group on the blue line, and we've seen that throughout the season. Kevin Minok has been winning all sorts of awards lately.
It is tough. And it's really tough to score against them.
Very tough to score. And
they're going to be a tough out in the playoffs.
They have a really good mix of everything. So I think adding a little bit, a piece like Wyatt Cook just kind of fills out the roster a little bit. Maybe plugs a hole in that forward group, that top 9 maybe as a 19-year-old. And I really like that move. And like you said, maybe they could have done a little bit more, but then we go back to maybe they didn't have any cards to do so. So I really like their team overall. They've been so hot lately.
Yeah, it's tough to comment on winners, maybe losers at the trade deadline, especially at the junior A level when you have this card situation.
And I think one other question too, along those lines of kind of what we just talked about with Melfort, I think one of the bigger questions going into this trade deadline was what's Battleford's going to do? I mean, they're the top team in the country.
We didn't even mention
them. And I think, what? They did add a defenseman.
I was just going to say, they added a depth defenseman, which was in...
Alex Isaac, I think was his name, correct?
Isaac or Isaac, do you think?
Ooh, good question.
I think
Marty. Where's Marty?
Marty's not here. I think it's Isaac.
I thought if I yelled loud enough, we would just hear Marty's voice come from the ceiling.
I'm not going to do an impersonation.
No, you're good. But I think, with Battleford's, it's that question of... I think a lot of people ask this question. Do you add to the group that's number 1 in the country and hasn't lost a game in regulation? Or do you let this group ride? Because they're built so well already. So do you just let them go? Or do you, if you do make an addition, do you somehow mess with the chemistry in the room? Like, there's all those questions, right? And maybe some of these coaches, maybe we're talking about Trevor Blevins in this situation with Melfort, maybe they just liked their group so much that they just wanted to keep going with them as well and not mess with it too much. Sure. So there's maybe part of that as well for some of these teams.
I'm going to give a shout out to our good friend Marty Martinson of the Battleford North Stars and battlefordsnow.com, where Marty does unreal work. But I'm going to read off a quote that he got from head coach and general manager Braden Klamosko. "We were looking for another defenseman, as you never can have enough depth at defense.
So true.
And if someone were to go down, we've got some bodies back there now that can fill in some major roles for us." And I mean, you touched on it. You bring in a 19-year-old defenseman who has experience at the junior A level. He can play up and down when it comes to your defensive pairings. And most likely, and he's going to make his debut this week as they play 3 games in 3 nights. So
there you go.
I really, that's another team, Battleford's with adding Isaac. I'm assuming it's Isaac. I think it's Isaac, but we'll find out, I guess, on Thursday when we listen to Marty's broadcast.
Isaac. Yeah, Isaac sounds more correct. Yeah.
Anyways, I like that. Just adding a piece to your lineup, and you don't have to take anything away from your lineup.
For sure.
So it's addition without subtraction.
Absolutely.
Which is really good for the Battleford North Stars. And obviously we've seen some interesting moves in the SJHL prior to the trade deadline. And again, it wasn't as busy as we thought it was going to be. Well, kind of. It really, we didn't expect it to be incredibly busy.
Yeah.
But you know what? There was some splashes.
There was only three teams that didn't do a move. Am I thinking that correctly? We didn't see Yorkton make one.
Nope.
We didn't see Larange. Well, I guess Larange did make one.
Larange made a trade.
Yeah, they traded Briltz and then Estevan. So is that really only just the two?
Then. Yep.
So yeah.
And what a great segue, Clark, because the 2 teams who didn't make a trade, the Estevan Bruins and the Yorkton Terriers, play tonight at Affinity Place, 7:00 puck drop, as both teams look to get back in the win column, because both teams got swept by their highway rivals.
Right.
In the opening weekend of 2023. The other game tonight actually is also the Larange Ice Wolves, as they play host to the Nipawin Hawks. Larange also looking to get their first win at 2023 as well. The other thing I was going to bring up, Clark, hey, by the way, I didn't ask you, obviously holiday break's over.
Oh, yeah.
I assume you had a great holidays. Great holidays, thumbs up. Yeah, thumbs up. They're great. Awesome.
Great holidays.
Santa great to you? Was Santa good to you?
Yeah. Jamie, I love how Jamie said, doesn't matter about me because the kids had a good time. I will say that Santa treated me quite well, so I was pretty pumped about it. And the kids also got treated quite well, and we've seen a lot of the gifts and presents that were given spewing throughout the house.
Right.
Is that a word? Spewing? Sure.
Yeah.
Let's go with it. So it's been a great time. We had some really good time off, got some good family time.
Sure. Yeah.
So
and also, I heard the reason why Santa was good to you was because Santa brought Clark some tickets for the Polaris side-by-side courtesy of the SJHL raffle. You can check out the tickets at sjhlraffle.ca, where you could potentially win a brand new Polaris Ranger side-by-side.
Oh,
one ticket, $25. 3 tickets for $60. 10 tickets for $100. I mean, it's the gift that keeps on giving when you think about it.
To be honest. And again, we say this all the time, but we can, if you didn't get what you wanted, here's the chance.
You know what? Yeah, if I could win the side-by-side, I would be driving that to work in the spring and the summer.
For sure. Just drive it around the facility here.
Yeah, why not? That'd be fun.
Yeah.
The deadline to purchase tickets is April 23rd, I do believe, and the draw will be made live on SJHL Insiders on April 27th. You can learn more about the side-by-side, the raffle, anything you'd like when it comes to this at sjhlraffle.ca. It's
easy.
The gift that keeps on giving. Hey, Valentine's Day is a month away.
Yep. My wife's birthday's coming up.
Perfect.
That'll be good as well.
There's
the Easter Bunny can hide the raffle tickets around the house.
Yeah, why don't the Easter Bunny can put the tickets in the eggs.
Right, and then pop. Wow. Every single time.
Wow, a side-by-side ticket.
Woo!
Cool.
Let's go.
Anyways.
Give me more.
Those are expensive Easter eggs.
Yeah, very.
But yes.
Throw a piece of chocolate in there, too.
Of course, it's a special trade deadline edition of SJ Insider. Next week, we'll be back to our usual Thursday. But we figured for timeliness, we would do the show on a Wednesday. But of course, before we go, we have to give a big shout out to all of our sponsors here at the SJHL: Chevrolet, Capital Auto Mall, Cantera Seeds, RBC, SaskTel, SGU, Direct West, Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, Tourism Saskatchewan.
There you go.
It's going too quick.
That's okay.
Young's Equipment, Sask Lotteries. Thank you. Polaris, SGI, who is our podcast sponsor on both Apple and Spotify for our audio podcast. Big shout out to them. Be sure, it's a busy week in the SJHL.
Oh, man. I was looking ahead. This weekend is crazy. There's a lot of games. There's a lot of stuff happening.
There you go. And you can find out all the information on sjhl.ca, or you can watch SJHL Game Day, every SJHL Game Day, on the social media platforms. So be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Get on it.
That's where you'll find all the shows, the features, the highlights, and everything else your heart desires when it comes to the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. This has been a lengthier episode, to be honest with you, than I thought it would be, just considering it's the two of us talking, recapping the trade deadline. But it's been a great episode of SJHL Insider. For Clark Munroe, my name's Jeromy Corrigan. Thank you so much for joining us on SJHL Insider, and enjoy the games this week, everyone.